Good morning, and you're very welcome to this morning's Signpost webinar. This morning, we're delighted to be joined by Micheál Callahan. Micheál is with Community Wetlands Forum. And our today's webinar is Teagasc's contribution to World Wetland Day, which is today. And it's, I suppose, the start of a whole series of events over the next week, which are being organised by the Irish Ramsar Wetland Committee. And I'm just delighted to be joined by Micheál. Micheál, you might just turn on your sound there, and Catherine. Catherine, you might just tell us a little bit about the Irish Ramsar Wetland Committee and the work that they do.
Yeah, well, Ramsar is a place in Iran where the first convention was held, so that's where we get the name from. And Ireland is one of 160 signatures to the Convention on Wetlands, Conservation of Wetlands. So then in Ireland, because we've signed up to it, Ireland has an Irish Ramsar Wetland Committee, and it comprises of a representative from, state, semi-state NGOs, academia, community groups, representative. And look at, I suppose, all our mission in life is to promote wetlands. I mean, we're all working in our own worlds, but we're trying to coordinate. The power of the group is always stronger. So, again, the events this week are kind of anything that we know. Lots of good work goes on, Pat, as you and I know, and nobody knows about it. So I suppose we don't, that's our mission in life, is to get out the word about the value of wetlands. And I'm sure Micheál will go on to explain, the biggest problem I think we have is what it is. And like behind me mightn't be the first thing you'd think of as a wetland, but our peatlands, our bogs, our
And
wetlands. So
it's a worldwide organization, and it's a worldwide problem. There are really valuable wetlands, probably in parts of the world that you don't really realize might have wetlands, but they are a key part of our ecology and a key part of the health of the planet, really.
absolutely.
Micheál, you're very welcome. I suppose a lot of the time when we have speakers on here, they're from a scientific background. Your background is maybe a little bit different.
Yeah, that's it. I suppose my own background. I mean, I'm the development officer with the Community Wetlands Forum, and my own background is, I suppose, prior to this, really I suppose, governance and policy and but really looking at, I suppose, how those mechanisms interact with and impact, local stakeholders and communities. So yeah, delighted to be here. Thanks a million for having me on, and looking forward to.
And, and you'll be describing in your presentation the work of what is the Community Wetlands Forum and the work that you do. So if you're ready,
Yeah,
get you to start your
share the
presentation.
screen. Yeah, absolutely.
And just to remind people that to use the Q&A for questions that we'll put to Micheál after he finishes his presentation.
Okay, so hopefully everyone can hear that or see that even and hear me.
Yeah.
So look, listen, thanks a million again for having me on. I will speak about the work of the Community Wetlands Forum and its members, and talk a little bit, I suppose, about lessons learned and, opportunities and challenges around community-led wetland protection, conservation, management, promotion projects in Ireland. So the Community Wetlands Forum, I mean, it sort of is what it says in the tin in a way. It aims to promote, develop, and support community-led wetland conservation in Ireland, and it recognises wetlands as being important places of biodiversity, climate action, community integration, well-being, and ownership. And I think that well-being and community integration bit is really important, and it's great that the theme of this year's World Wetlands Day is wetlands and human well-being. And I think throughout this presentation, I'll hopefully give you a sense of how um, community-led projects interacting with wetlands, they deliver benefits for wetlands and nature, but also then deliver benefits for community as well and human well-being. And the forum itself then is a platform for community-led wetland conservation groups around Ireland, and we're a member-led platform. So I think that's very important, and we're very unique in that regard, I think. Um, And one of the main benefits of membership of the Community Wetlands Forum for community projects is, I suppose, access to, not just access to, but they're contributing to, I suppose, peer-to-peer learning, peer-to-peer information sharing, peer-to-peer support. So basically, other community groups and people involved in communities coming together, learning from each other, updating each other on their projects, and supporting each other really, and very strong and genuine connections then are built through that. We also work to encourage and support new community wetland projects, and of course we engage and work alongside other agencies and bodies as well. And I suppose, the origins of the Community Wetlands Forum, CWF has been around. You'll hear me use that acronym a little bit. Has been around for the last 10 years or so, and it was initially, purely coming together of community-led projects, all on a voluntary basis to support each other and learn from each other, and I suppose to give maybe more attention and more of a spotlight and more influence to the importance of bottom-up community-led strategies to protect wetlands and promote wetlands and protect nature. And we recognize that that is an incredibly important aspect of nature restoration. But we also need, and we also depend on the top-down element. So in a way, I suppose we strive for maybe this kind of meeting in the middle, and genuine sort of working together and collaboration. And I think probably throughout, in the past anyway, historically, maybe when it comes to environmental protection and policy and legislation, and initiatives in Ireland, maybe that bottom up approach in the past has unfortunately been maybe just a little bit neglected, or there has often been more of a top-down approach, which hasn't always maybe worked out maybe the way it was intended. So things are changing, thankfully, and we it's great to see big changes in terms of projects been delivered by National Parks and Wildlife Service, semi-states, major projects like Wild Atlantic Nature as well. So we're in a much more positive place now, I think. So just to briefly touch, I suppose, on the benefits of conserving wetlands. I mean, there's numerous benefits in terms of water flow, improved water quality. Massive one is around carbon storage and carbon sequestration. All wetlands, but I suppose in particular peatlands, and I think that's maybe something which is gradually being more widely understood. I mean, it's obviously well understood amongst sort of, scientists and ecologists and people working maybe on peatland issues. But I mean, I grew up in North Monaghan, and okay, we don't have the raised bogs that they have in the Midlands, but on the border with Tyrone and Fermanagh, there's an upland area, Slieve Bay, and I would have gone up there quite a lot as a child and as a teenager, but I wouldn't have maybe been aware or appreciated how important the landscape was for, I suppose, for that, climate action, really, and so we have a huge natural resource here in Ireland, and peatlands. There's a statistic which kind of blows my mind a bit. Peatlands cover about 3% of the Earth's surface, but I think store around a third of the Earth's carbon. So they're just an incredible carbon store. They're also a home for biodiversity and wildlife, and I'll convey, through I suppose our projects in particular, that they could be sites for environmental education, recreation value, very important from a cultural, value and sense of place. And there are, I suppose more recently there are opportunities for sustainable and ecotourism, and I'll talk a little bit more about this as time goes on. And just to say, so, we're the Community Wetlands Forum as opposed to the Community Peatlands Forum. So while maybe the majority of our members are involved with or associated with peatlands, especially in the Midlands, uh, I suppose we are open to community groups looking at all kinds of wetlands, and these include, fens, rivers, riparian zones along rivers, lake fringes, wet grassland, turlough, wet woodlands, floodplains, coastal wetlands, and even human and man-made wetlands. So, there's a huge number of wetlands in Ireland. And you know, here I suppose these graphics show a little bit of the potential and also the impact of our members and of community-led wetland management initiatives in general. So the first map with the pinpoints um, shows you our member groups, community group members across Ireland. So we have about 40 community group members across Ireland, all working at different levels of engagement with wetlands. So some of our member groups are, quite maybe far advanced in terms of focusing on wetland and peatland restoration and protection initiatives. Others are developing recreational projects, so walking trails and boardwalks, which really contribute to well-being. Others are focusing on, citizen science, doing a lot of citizen science, recording species that are found on our wetlands. A lot of our groups as well do a lot of education and outreach around the importance of wetlands. And then other groups, while they don't necessarily carry out the restoration works themselves, they suppose they work alongside state agencies and other agencies to, I suppose, catalyze buy-in and support for restoration, which is incredibly important. So then the other map, then the one in the middle, and I think this has been updated even since, but this is from Wetland Surveys Ireland. There are over 13,000. I think this map shows over 12,000, but in fact, I was at a presentation recently and I heard there are over 13,000 known wetlands, different types of wetlands around Ireland. So we're literally surrounded by wetlands, and so there's huge potential for further community led initiatives or community initiatives to promote and protect wetlands. And then the infographic on the right, then I suppose, is just a little bit of a snapshot of the work and the impact, the collective impact of the members of the Community Wetlands Forum. So between community group, individual and stakeholder members, we have about 58 members in 15 counties. So we'd love to have, grow organically, of course, but we'd love to grow organically to a space where we have a community member group in each county in Ireland. Those member groups, and this is probably a conservative number based on survey responses, but those member groups are engaged with or involved with over 2,275 hectares of wetlands across 23 protected areas. So across really, I suppose, significant, really important wetland sites, undertaking education programs, walking trails, conservation measures, and lots of partnership as well. So it's nice to see that, I suppose, collective effort and ripple effect, because I know sometimes when you're, when you're working on maybe a community project and you're very much focused in your locality, sometimes you can feel like, you're maybe I don't know, not making that much of a difference. But when you see the collective impact and collective effort, I think the opposite is true. So I mentioned that the Community Wetlands Forum has been around for the last 10 years and has grown organically. Initially an entirely voluntary run initiative. So we're now myself, I'm a full-time development officer, and then we're lead partners on a project called Connecting Communities with Peatlands project. So there are two staff members, and this is these are photos from our launch event. So you might be wondering, how are we launching if we've been around for 10 years? So our membership last year decided to establish I suppose a newly independent company limited by guarantee. So we're now the Community Wetlands Forum CLG. So that's a very significant, I suppose, milestone, for a member-led, bottom-up organization promoting and working towards community-led conservation in Ireland. So we had a great day. We had a great day in Athlone. Here are just some of the pictures from that launch event, and we were delighted to have Minister Noonan attend that. And I think you see especially in that photo there at the bottom right, you see the genuine warmth and the genuine connections and the real strength of the peer-to-peer approach there. So that was a really historic day. So hopefully now this works. So this is a short video. So you won't have to listen to me for the next couple of minutes. So here's a short video featuring a couple of our members and myself as well. So hopefully this works.
My name is Micheál Callaghan and I'm the Development Officer with the Community Wetlands Forum. Community Wetlands Forum is a platform for community groups who are involved in the promotion of their wetlands and the protection and management of wetlands and peatlands around Ireland. So I suppose historically, when it comes to peatlands and even environmental policies and conservation, often it has been top down and oftentimes communities and local stakeholders maybe have felt isolated and have felt as if things are being almost dictated to them. But our approach, of engaging communities and putting communities at the centre, it's empowering, it can, develops buy-in, trust as well, trust of sort of conservation and policy. Like over time, hearts and minds are changing.
I'm Eileen Fahy, chairperson at Kilteeth and Tidy Towns, and I also represent the group on the Community Wetlands Forum. If it wasn't for the Community Wetlands Forum, we probably would have a lot less done. This place would be a lot more boring, I'd say, because bogs have always inspired people, but to have the courage to actually unleash your own creativity, which is what it did with us.
My name is Eugene Dunbar, and I'm actively involved in a local community group called Ethos. And Ethos stands for Everything Tyrrell's Pass Has on Show. And really in Ethos we've been exploring all different aspects of our local built and natural environment. The Community Wetland Forum helped us in Tyrrell's Pass to flourish basically, to extend our knowledge, to get involved in a network which was beyond our local community.
So we have groups that are at various stages of engagement with wetlands. So you have some groups who are very far advanced in terms of restoration and rewetting works. You have other groups who are just beginning. You also have other groups who are really focusing on recreation and focusing on the sort of mental and physical well-being benefits, the culture, the heritage. We're a really broad church, essentially, of groups not just actively conserving but also celebrating these unique places in Ireland.
Looking at it from a community, from the aspect of a community driven, and how local communities can interact with their bogs, and that really excited us, and that really was the spark which got us onto our current project, which was to develop a boardwalk here on Cloncrow. You're in a real community of like-minded people, and that's the key to it. Like,
for any small group, I think it would be very wise to engage with the Community Wetlands Forum. As I said, it's the place where we got support, confidence, drive, information, resources, support, people, human beings to talk to who understand all of this and who've been there before, many of them over a long, long time.
If you are a community organisation or a local group wanting to do something with your local wetland, then please do get in touch. I would love to hear from you and figure out a way that we can work together, and ultimately you won't regret it, so go for it.
Yeah, so hopefully that gave a sense of the CWF and I suppose the benefits that members see from being involved. And I'll just maybe briefly mention a little bit about the two members there that you saw. So that you saw Eugene Dunbar from Ethos and Tyrrell's Pass, and they've done a huge amount of community engagement around Cloncrow Bog, which is an NHA protected area, national protected area, which is directly, I suppose, just outside Tyrrell's Pass village. And one of the things that they recently did, again, bottom up, community led, was they developed a boardwalk and a trail connecting the village, going through some woodland, and then boardwalk going out over the bog, and then connecting back into the village. So there's a trail there now, I suppose about 3 kilometers in length, and it's a fantastic amenity, and it's a fantastic opportunity for people to connect with the peatland and nature there. And Eugene and the group run a lot of events. They do a lot of work, education work with local schools. They run a lot of biodiversity themed events. We had a fantastic day of nature walks and talks out there, and they also then collaborate with other research projects and then state-led conservation action there in Cloncrow Bog. And then Eileen Fahy from Kilteeve and 30 Towns. So that's around Clunlarge Bog in Roscommon, and that's a really important. It's an SAC, and it's a very significant peatland. But they developed those walking trails. They're using old bog roads, so in a way they haven't really. When I say developed, I suppose they have signposted and they maintained some of the trails as well. They've done amazing signage, working with local schools and artists and sculpture as well. So they've really brought in a lot of people into the work to promote the peatland, and they're now hoping that conservation works will start on Clunlarge Bog shortly. But we were at an event yesterday, and Eileen gave a really passionate presentation about their work. But one of the things she talked about was, I suppose, kind of how maybe our relationship with peatlands are changing. So she talked about how when turf cutting was initially stopped on the bog, there was a real sense of, talked about how people went through almost the stages of grieving, the 5 stages of grieving, because obviously this was a very important way of life and livelihood for a lot of people. It created, I suppose, a sense of placelessness in the village of Kilteven. But I suppose through Eileen in particular, through her leadership and vision, she's been working to create maybe a new vision and a new sense of place for Kilteven through these peatland projects. So I think I sort of maybe won't dwell on this slide too much. I think you've got a sense of some of the benefits from being a member of the CWF. But some of the quotes there, I never knew there was so much life on the bog. That was somebody who attended one of our, I think it was the nature walk and talk in Cloncrow Bog there that we had, and we had experts talking about the moths, the butterflies, the birds as well, the plants around the bog. And, somebody who'd grown up nearby was just sort of mesmerized by how much life and biodiversity there was on the bog. So I think when you hear that sort of organically, it's pretty inspiring. So then, okay, we need to obviously protect and conserve bogs and peatlands, but why would there be why should communities be involved, or why is it really important that communities are involved? So there's lots of benefits, of course. I've already touched on bogs being climate heroes, especially when they're protected. Amazing carbon sink. But I suppose from a community point of view, and actually Eileen, I just say Eileen talked about this. She talked about how, as a community person, a member of a community, she wanted to be able to look her grandchildren in the eye and say, look, I have done as much as I can, in climate action in terms of promoting and driving the benefits of the peatland from a nature's perspective. Connecting to and protecting biodiversity. So again, I kind of have touched on that a little bit already. Buy-in to conservation and a long-term sense of ownership. So it's fantastic to see all the state-led initiatives now that there are around the country. But I suppose ultimately, once a project or once contractors leave an area, it's the local community who remain there, and very important that there is genuine buy-in and genuine involvement from the get-go, because ultimately it's the community who will be custodians of the local peatland or local wetland into the future. There are opportunities for ecotourism and sustainable economic spin-offs. So, walking and recreation is probably going to become a bigger thing. And there's already, many of our member groups offer, I suppose, the walking trails, etc. So there's huge, and I'll touch on that a little bit. Folklore, culture, and heritage. Look, peatlands they're a part of our culture, part of our heritage, have been for hundreds, if not thousands of years, providing livelihoods, providing inspiration, providing warmth, fuel, you name it, and also home for nature, for curlew, for all these iconic birds and species. And it's really important that that is respected, and that is that we don't sort of forget where we came from. And so again, many of our member groups are engaged with, for example, projects to record history, oral history, heritage, physical and mental well-being. I think I touched on that already. You saw that in the video. Connection is a big one. Social capital, sense of community. So again, I talked about Eileen and creating a new sense of place. Like, we live in an era where, unfortunately, loneliness and is a big issue, and we're living maybe more separately from each other than we would have been in the past. And I often hear of people talking about, I suppose, growing up, going to the bog during the summer to foot the turf, and people coming together, and there being that sense of mehel. Well, through community-led peatland initiatives, there are opportunities. There are still opportunities for that sense of mehel and sense of togetherness, and a sense of creating a new sense of place and connection. And that's that. I think oftentimes, maybe when we think of peatlands and we think of peatland and wetland restoration, we maybe focus, I don't know if too much is the right word, but maybe we focus almost solely on the climate and the biodiversity benefits, which obviously are really important, but we need to think about the social and the community and the cultural. Those are probably immeasurable, but they're really important. And then, look, I think for going back again hundreds of years, or whatever, peatlands and nature have been important spaces for kind of artistic and cultural expression. And we have launched a webinar series. We launched it last night with Tina Claffey, photographer Tina Claffey, looking at I suppose, ways in which artists communicate the importance of wetlands and peatlands through their work. So, loads of benefits from community involvement and protection and management of wetlands. There we go. Yeah. So I just want to say a little bit more now about some of our own, maybe practical, or our work a little bit more in depth. So the Connecting Communities of Peatlands project. So that's a collaboration between the Community Wetlands Forum and Irish Rural Link, and my colleague Aoife leads on that. And that's a Just Transition project. So it's focused really on the Midlands, and it provides mentoring and capacity building training for peatland community groups. So does a lot of very practical training, for example, social media, Instagram training, digital folklore, storytelling. Aoife's project will be launching an online peatland ecology course as well very shortly. So lots of really amazing resources and support for community groups interested in peatland projects. So I suppose I touched on outreach, and as well. So we hold a number of study visits and skill sharing events around the country every year, and these are photos from one that we had in Kiltimagh and Mayo back in November, and that was in conjunction with the Kiltimagh Community Park, which is an amazing, brilliant community-led initiative to create an amenity in the village of Kiltimagh, but linking it in to the local peatland, linking, improving, I suppose, even just on a micro level, improving biodiversity, getting school children involved as well. So that was and there was huge interest in that event, which was quite heartening to see. Some of our other member groups and projects then as well, all focusing on different aspects of community-led wetland management. So Scahaboy Bog and Cloughjordan, the community there has really, I suppose, catalysed and worked with NPWS and Kilcha around the restoration works in Scahaboy Bog. Shannon Town wetlands. So I know a lot of our groups are bog focused, but Shannon Town wetlands is a non-bog wetland, and that's an urban wetland, and that's a restoration project being led by the local community there, with a lot of support from the likes of Lawpro and the local authority as well. Killyconny Bog project, that's focused on Killyconny Bog in Cavan, and they do, the forum to, I suppose, promote Killyconny Bog, and they do a lot of engagement. And then Carberry Bog in Kildare, Carberry Knockcur Bog, and that's an interesting project. I suppose, we all know that we're maybe in a period of transition, and that's not always maybe the most straightforward or easy thing. But so this is a bog which is owned by the community, and it's been managed by the community for the harvesting of turf for the community, and it still is to this day. But there are, I suppose, conversations happening in the community group around maybe what does the future look like, and ensuring a sustainable future for the bog. So those are, I really like that, because that's community, grassroots, democratic discussions happening naturally. And I think you need that space for those conversations to happen, for people to hear different opinions, and maybe they've engaged a lot with the Community Wetlands Forum and come to a lot of our events and seen how communities are engaging in different ways with peatlands. So I mentioned Cloncrow already, Cloncrow Bog, Eugene. Just one photo here, I think, kind of encapsulates that sense of well-being. We had an event there last year, and Eugene organised the local choir from Mullingar to come and sing on kind of a viewing platform on the boardwalk. So that was a brilliant event. So Abbey Leaks Bog project, often, I suppose, rightly hailed as a really successful and an inspiring example of community-led peatland restoration, and it's been quite successful in terms of carbon, of the actual restoration of the peatlands and carbon sequestration, and they've had a lot of support from National Parks and Wildlife Service. But I don't want to dwell on that aspect of it too much. I really want to maybe talk about the social, cultural, and to an extent economic spin-off. So they've also developed walking trails and boardwalks throughout the bog, and with, again, this is community-led, volunteers coming in, building and maintaining the boardwalk. So obviously it's a significant amount of work. However, over the years, the Abbey Leaks Bog project they've developed a genuine, very strong, rooted in the sense of place, passion and love for the bog, and love for the project. And I think, you see that photo there, if I can move this thing. Maybe I can't, but anyway, you can see that photo there in the bottom right of volunteers. I think that was in January last year, I think, out drinking tea while they're repairing the boardwalk. So that sense of Mehel that I talked about, it's an example of how that connection and Mehel can still exist. And just move into the next slide if I can. Yeah, so you don't see it there, but there's been an economic spin-off, I think, as well, for the town and for the hotel adjacent. So as a result of the success of the Bog project, there's been quite a few peatland-related conferences in the local hotel, and the local hotel have set up a new coffee dock as well, an outdoor coffee dock. And so again, there's benefits not just nature or not just the people visiting the bog, but it benefits the wider community as well. Including large bogs. Here are just some photos. You saw it in the video earlier, but I think two things are particularly interesting here. You have the sculpture, so that's Gulliver, that's and the reason for Gulliver maybe will become clearer. This is the turf harvesting machine, which was found on the bog. And this wasn't a state, this wasn't Bord na Móna, or it wasn't sort of a big agency. This was sort of local people harvesting turf, but it meant a lot to the local community who had maybe used this machine to see that it was I suppose preserved. So they kind of, you can see they gave it a lick of paint, and they've protected it, and they have a bit of signage there about the history of turf cutting on Large Bog. But apparently colloquially it was known as Lilliput, that machine. So they then created a kind of a theme around Gulliver's Travels and Lilliput. So this sculpture is Gulliver, and it's a great, amazing feature. So again, just showing how through community effort and imagination, these places are enlivened. Mentioned the creativity for the wetlands webinar series, which kicked off last night. So this is a new fortnightly webinar series, and it'll showcase how various artists are connecting people and wetlands, and how art is often a media that can maybe I think it was said last night in the webinar, it can transcend hearts and minds in a way that maybe other media or other forms of communication don't. So in 2 weeks' time, so Thursday, 2 weeks, we'll have another webinar with Fionnuala McKenna, who's involved in the Cloughjordan Community Development Association and Scahalboy Bog, talking about their artistic project, Voices from the Past Breathe Loudly. So now I think I've been talking long enough, so I'll bring it to a conclusion now. It's just some final points. So look, I mean, wetlands and peatlands, they can be contentious spaces, but they don't have to be. Communities want to be involved and want to lead on projects, but often just need a little bit of support and guidance in getting to the starting point. There's lots of ways for communities to lead on or be involved in promoting and protecting wetlands. So it could be via direct restoration, but there's lots of other ways. I think I've shown that. Community-led projects and genuine community engagement, that could be engagement with state and semi-state as well, creates real opportunities for connection, friendship, peer learning. Really important to celebrate and connect to the past, and we shouldn't be ashamed of it. Sometimes maybe when we're changing maybe from one mode to another, we can almost throw the baby out with the bathwater. But I mean, this is our past, not just our past, it's still our present in many ways, but our present with peatlands and with turf is a part of who we are. I think in terms of a lot more maybe communication is probably required around the importance of peatlands, in particular, probably from a climate perspective. We probably don't realize, or a lot of people maybe don't realize just how valuable of a resource in terms of fighting climate change peatlands are. And I know that can be a little bit loaded at times, but I think there's probably more communication is needed around that. For long-term buy-in and for genuine sustainability of projects, I think it's really important that community and local stakeholder genuine local involvement from the get-go is absolutely vital. On that, we look towards developing place-based solutions, and obviously, there's no one-size-fits-all approach there. A lot of landowners, including non-farmers, so farm people who own peatland but don't necessarily farm, they want to be involved, maybe aren't always sure of how or what supports are available. Great to see biodiversity and climate action officers being appointed around the country, and I think there's huge potential for collaboration there with community groups. And look, if you're curious or know of a community group or in a community group and you'd like to get involved, get in touch, or you'll find out more on our website. So hopefully that has been useful and interesting. So there's our contact details. So do get in touch. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Micheál. Fascinating. And I suppose there's a good few questions starting to come in there, but a couple of quick questions. I suppose we have a few, or quite a number now of very large restoration projects going on. And I suppose a question is there a scope for, as well as if you want the industrial scale restoration, is there a potential role for communities in working with agencies on those big projects?
In terms of the bigger projects, is it? Yeah. Absolutely, yeah, no, definitely. And I think it's not only is there scope. I think it's a must really in terms of buy-in and in terms of maybe communicating properly with communities and people living around bigger projects. We'll say, because I know sometimes through misinformation or whatever fear and things can build up. So I think it's not only as their scope, I think it's incredibly important. So, and it is happening. I mean, I know it maybe not, it's not perfect yet, but I mean we're seeing more and more of that. So yeah, there definitely is. Yeah.
And you talked a little bit and about, I suppose, a number of linked things, a sense of place and a sense of community. But you also talked about grief around, I suppose, for a way of life that was I suppose integral to a lot of communities. And we probably, in other parts of the country, I suppose we don't have too many bogs where I am here in Wexford, but we don't get or have enough of an appreciation of the change that people have been asked to make in these areas, and the grief that comes with it. You put your whole life into something, and suddenly you're told you're not relevant. And in fact, a lot of it is now around saying, well, we were wrong to do what we were doing. But I think the point you make about celebrating what was done in these, and the importance of these bogs in the total Irish culture, is something that we do need to take back and to celebrate a bit.
Definitely, definitely, 100%. You know, whether it's through storytelling or heritage. I think there's huge scope as well now for heritage projects, just transition, we'll say, heritage projects. And like, I know, I think it's Sean Kane, I think, has done a lot of work in terms of recording and capturing the railways, the Bord na Móna railways of Ireland. And I mean, that's an incredible part of our industrial heritage, you know. So I think it's really important that's valued, and it's recorded, and it's not forgotten about, because it's you know, not just our industrial heritage, but probably our heritage as a state. You know, the when we were a young state, these state agencies played a massive role in our development. So yeah, that's really
Catherine,
important.
a lot of questions coming in.
Lots of questions, lots of compliments. I won't read them all out, Michal, but really appreciating your talk. Just a couple of ones I know you'll give a. Where do rivers and streams fit in with wetlands as a category?
Yeah. So I mean, my understanding of wetlands is that incorporates rivers and streams and the riparian zones as well. So I mean, projects along riparian zones, for example, along the edges of rivers, like, are vitally important in terms of protecting them. And I know, for example, like the work of some of the rivers trusts around the country, and where I'm from, the Blackwater River Catchment Trust up in North Monaghan, does great work around protecting those and working with landowners. So yeah, definitely vital. Yeah.
They're all wetlands. Your focus just today was particularly peatlands.
Yeah.
But all, I assume, are welcome in your organisation. And there's a few questions about that. Is there any point in communities with small wetland habitats getting involved? We have 2 ponds and a reed in our town, but nothing as significant as a bog or salt marsh. Now, somebody else might say everything is equal there. And another question there about, is there a minimum size required to join your forum? So just small. What about small ones?
No minimum size required at all. The only thing is required is a genuine, I suppose, interest really in wetlands and their protection. So that's no minimum size.
Specific, very important question here about what's your advice to community groups on public liability insurance?
Yeah. I mean, look, that is obviously an important and tricky one. I know. I mean, a lot of our member groups have public liability insurance, and obviously, if you're going to be undertaking events or anything, it's a must. Happy to maybe chat if they want to get in touch with me directly. I could chat to you a little bit more about that.
Okay, lovely. And I expect you'll be getting a lot of phone calls by the questions I'm getting here. An individual landowner, and how could advisors help as well in the process? But we work with farmers, so there's farmers and advisors watching here who know there's somebody very interested. But as an individual, where do you go?
As an individual landowner, is it?
Yeah,
not a farmer. Yeah,
a valuable wetland. Can I?
Yeah. So that
organization.
That is, I think that is probably a little bit of a gap at the moment, maybe in terms of the individual landowners. Now, what I will say is, if the individual was to maybe get involved with or form a community group, like there are funding schemes like the Peatland Community Engagement Scheme, which is run by National Parks and Wildlife Service, or even Community Foundation Ireland has grants for even initially looking at assessments and studies of the habitats, and that Law Pro as well. Local Authority Water Programme Office might be, they run a lot of support as well, financial support. Now I know within our own network, then I mean, we have a couple of projects. So the Tullamore Lions Club, for example, again, I suppose partnership between a community group and a landowner, but they are working directly with the landowner in Offaly on the restoration of a single kind of privately owned site of peatland. So there are opportunities there, but I think it's probably a little bit of a gap, I think, still.
Okay, okay. Well, very interesting. Now, a very specific one here. Wetlands give off considerably more methane than pasture. Are there any nationwide measurements planned? Has anyone done any analysis of the satellite data that seems to be becoming more available? And there's an old reference for a methodology there.
Yeah. Yeah, so as far as to the best of my knowledge of the I think that, I mean I know the EPA are do a lot of work around that. I think you're right. Maybe it's not quite. There are
Yeah.
still some imperfections, or there's still work ongoing. But I know the EPA definitely do a lot of work, and then individual research projects as well.
Not
Yeah.
specifically your Patty, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, and I suppose the flux towers that are being put out around the country by Teagasc as part of the national inventory project have a number of those flux towers going out on wetlands and peatlands. So they should be able to give indications of the fluxes of a variety of gases, of greenhouse gases in particular, and what the levels are under different management and under different conditions. So that will, I presume, add significantly to that over the next couple of years.
Questions looking for the details, but I think the best way there to say is that all our webinars are recorded and the presentation will be up on the website in a few days. So just you keep in touch with that website. You will have all Micheál's details there. That's the best way to say it. A specific one about ponds and sadness about where ponds land changes ownership and the pond is filled in. But is there anything in law or scheme regulation enforcement to deter landowners from filling in ponds and wetlands, or possibly even encourage landowners to retain them?
Yeah, I mean, it's planning regulations and EIA and that. So there, yeah, I mean, there are, yeah.
Are there? But I'd say, Micheál, you'd agree with me that what the work you're doing and the best hope we have for the future, rather than law, is education.
100%. And I think, like, going back to even what I said is kind of at the start, like going back to the 90s, even in the 80s, like, like we've had environmental laws and environmental protections in place, but through even the early days of the Habitats directives, like going back to 1992, and so it's one thing having, I suppose, the legislation in place. The second thing is how it's actually implemented, and through, I think, genuine engagement with communities and landowners, then you can sort of you can maybe do probably a lot more good than just having laws. Obviously, you need enforcement as well, but I think there's a big engagement piece that needs to happen first.
Just want to go back to a question I said about the dried out peatlands give off more methane, not wet ones, and that's true, isn't it? I mean, if the bog is wet and good, or Pat, maybe you want to comment?
No, I think, well, it's like a lot of things. It's slightly more complex than that. I think the dried, where there's a lot of drainage on peatland, they tend to give off quite a lot of CO2. When they're re-wetted, if they're re-wetted up to just below the surface, they tend to go into a low level of emissions of both. And as re-wetting goes right up to the surface, then you get an increase in methane. So it is quite complex, and I suppose it's one of the things that there's a lot of research going on to try and understand the exact dynamics of what's happening there, to try and minimize the losses, and to get management that would minimize the losses.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I'm neither an ecologist nor a hydrologist. However, I know from, I suppose, some of our projects and working in the area that, as you said yourself, is complex and not necessarily linear. So I think initially, after the water table has been raised, there can be, as you said, more methane given off, but then over time, then there's a stabilization, and I think one of the, speaking in very general terms here now, of course, and then one of the comments there mentioned, I mean, ultimately the aim is to get to a place then through restoration where the wetland or the peatland is a fantastic store of carbon in particular, and has a net, I suppose, a net benefit to the climate. So that's.
And I think in general, it's if a peatland is in good condition from a habitat point of view, it's good from a carbon point of view. In general, wouldn't that be true?
Yeah, I suppose, yeah, and I mean a wet peatland essentially as well. It was one slide I didn't show, and probably maybe should have shown in this presentation, but it was from the Abbey Leaks Bog project. Like they've done periodic measurements or regular measurements, but at different points in time. So before the restoration works, kind of midway through, and then recently in 2022, and you can actually see, based on the various ecotopes, so the various, I suppose, sections of the bog, depending on their condition at the start, how over time, so some of the sections, some of the ecotopes have gone from net emitters of carbon to net sort of sinks. They're actually sequestering carbon, and then the others, okay, while they're still emitting carbon, they're emitting much less carbon than they were at the start. So you can actually see over time the measurements, and this is I suppose a community-led project. So so it shows over time actually how through restoration works, peatlands are becoming carbon sinks basically.
Pat, I have two more that I want to get to before I go back to you. Was traditional hand cutting and harvesting considered sustainable, and is it only the big machines that do the harm?
Yeah, I mean, look, in ways I could say it's probably a complex enough one, but like, I mean, look, obviously the more that's cut and industrially cut, the more damage is going to be done, of course.
But I suppose it's the drainage, isn't it?
Yeah.
And look at a very important one. I came in first, but I left it till my last one there because you could go on forever. What's the biggest challenge in working with wetlands?
Good question. Well, I suppose maybe from a community perspective in particular, there might be challenges around, for example, access, like land access. Like if a community has, say, a particular project in mind, like the Turles Pass project, the boardwalk that I showed you there. So that's community led, but they had to get permission of landowners, written permission of landowners for the boardwalk. So I suppose just depending on local conditions and whatever, that can be a challenge, and obviously like particularly around peatlands, there's lots of owners, there's lots of turbary rights holders as well, and they're not always maybe known or to the community. That can be a challenge from a community perspective. Yeah, definitely.
Sorry, Pat, just one last one there, a comment. The Hare's Corner project, remember that one? It has been rolled out in Clare, Mayo and Carlow, and could fund ponds. So look up that for the people talking about ponds. Hare's Corner project. Okay, back to you, Pat.
Yeah, and I suppose there's a lot involved in getting a community to work together on projects like this. Is there any blueprint, or do they all come from very different motivations? And are there a number of kind of key criteria that determine whether they're successful or not?
Yeah. Again, I would say there's no one size fits all as such, but like a lot of our community groups come at it from different perspectives, we'll say. But I suppose having a group or having some kind of a committee in place, engaging widely through events with the wider community. A lot of, I mean, look, a lot of, I suppose, effort as well, and voluntary time, and then knowing where to go, knowing where to go for support and celebrating the small wins. So look, if there is a group, if there are anyone in the webinar, maybe who's in a group or knows of a group, maybe who'd like to, maybe has an idea, happy to talk to you about it. We have a couple of resources. So on our website, there's a booklet, guidelines for communities managing peatlands and wetlands, and it's updated sort of periodically, but there's various, I suppose, guidelines and signposts in terms of maybe steps that a community group could or should take. Another thing I would always say, so if you are at beginning a community project and you have your group and have your structure, a good place to start is a plan, coming up with maybe a baseline study of the site, or developing a plan, because then once you know what your starting point is and where you want to get to, then you can maybe more readily identify funding opportunities or partners and things like that. So.
And in terms of, I suppose, one of the things that scares people a lot is that issue you just mentioned around funding opportunities and the organizations or the groupings that where funding is available from. And I suppose one of the other things that tends to scare people is some of the funding opportunities come with fairly high co-funding, which puts a lot of pressure on communities. So you might just give us a minute on the I suppose the support funding landscape that's out there. I assume there's some funding comes from the fund for just transition.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, look, I suppose at the moment, there probably are quite a few funding streams out there. But yeah, I mean, as you said, like, I think that can be a challenge, partly the co-funding element of it, but also probably like a lot of applications, maybe especially from a community perspective, like when you're on voluntary time, can be cumbersome and can take a while. But like National Parks and Wildlife Service run the Peatland Community Engagement Scheme, and I expect I'm assuming that will be opening this year again. That's been running over the last number of years, and a lot of our member groups have successfully applied for funding there. Now there is a co-funding requirement of 20%, but voluntary time, for example, can be used as so. Again, I think if you have any questions around that, get in touch, and I could put you in touch with maybe community groups that have successfully applied. LawPro is another I'd say they run regular funding, the water and the community fund, and that's, I would say, probably fairly friendly from a community perspective, and they have their community officers around the country as well who are happy to help and talk to community groups. So, and then obviously there's the bigger ones, the Just Transition and the Leader, and I mean there's more and more, I think, in terms of small projects. Hare's Corner was mentioned. So yeah.
And I presume most of the projects that most of the groups you're working with probably started small and have grown over a period. You don't have to take a massive project in the beginning. Okay, I think we're running out of time. Micheál, absolutely fascinating. I think it's brought a whole new opportunity potentially to people, and a bit of a realization that there's a future there for some of the wetland areas that previously would have, I suppose, formed a fuel source as their major contribution. Now there's a whole new potential contribution into the future of these areas, and it's, I suppose, up to us now to grasp that. So thank you once again, Catherine, and thank you, Micheál.
And just don't forget wetlands.ie for the events this week. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks very much.
irishwetlands.ie for the events organised under the Ramsar. So next week, I suppose we're talking about the old fuel source. We're moving towards new fuel sources, and as we move more and more towards renewables, I think wind last year accounted for 39% of our electricity production here in Ireland, which might have been thought to be impossible a number of years ago. The next major movement is on solar. And while I think only about 0.2% of our electricity came from solar, that's due to increase, I think, rapidly, with projection of up to 2% next year. So next week we have Barry Casling from Teagasc, our specialist, who will be talking about solar PV in agriculture. So until then, thanks to our production team, Mary and Yvonne, thanks to our speakers, and we'll see you this time next week.
Bye-bye.